Guys, Boxing Gossip here. Hope everyone's doing well. It's Sunday evening. I've finally been able to watch Gervonta Davis versus Jose Pedraza. Obviously, very, very, very good fight. Hugely impressive performance from Gervonta Davis. I appreciate I'm putting this video up pretty much a day late, so I'm sure by now all of you guys will have either seen the fight or checked out post-fight reviews from various other YouTube contributors. I haven't actually watched any of the other YouTube guys put up a video on this one, so this is just going to be my own personal thoughts, freestyle, having just watched the fight. I only had a limited amount of time this morning because I had a few other commitments today. So I watched the Gale Badu Jack, obviously, as the main fight, and video for that's already up on the channel. So if you haven't seen that, please do check it out. But yeah, I wanted to do a separate video on this one because Gervonta Davis, clearly a very, very, very exciting talent, and clearly someone who's going to be red hot on the lips of many, many boxing fans, particularly after the performance last night against Jose Pedraza. Pedraza, for me, was someone who I had been aware of for some time, but I was particularly aware of off the back of his performance against Stephen Smith, who, as you guys know, is a well-known UK fighter in the super featherweight division. Now, essentially, I made Pedraza a favourite to beat Stephen Smith. Stephen Smith has never been someone I've been, totally sold on in terms of being a world-class prospect. Having said that, the manner with which Pedraza beat him, for me, was very impressive. Pedraza showed a huge range of skills and showed he was levels above Stephen Smith. And in the lead up to this fight against Gervonta Davis, I actually thought we may see something similar. Because Davies was very young in his career. He was only 22 years old. I understand with this win he may potentially be the youngest world champion currently active in the sport. So he was very young in his career and he hadn't fought a high level of opposition. So I was thinking, I know he had an extensive amateur pedigree, but I was thinking a guy so young, lacking in so many big fights, stepping up to face a guy like Pedraza, who's got a lot of skills, a lot of awkwardness, etc. I remember thinking this has the potential to be a tough night's work for Gervonta Davis. But what was obvious from the second he got into the ring was the confidence and swagger behind his work. And when a guy is that confident and that at ease at there, he's a very hard man to beat. For me, in the early rounds, Davis looked like he knew he was going to win. I almost felt like Davis knew it was his time in there. He was so... I don't want to say he was arrogant in the ring, but he had this sort of swagger about him, this sort of confidence that it was his time and that he was a level above. This did not look like a fighter who was coming out for his big step up, nervous, with self-doubt as to whether he could or could not rip the world championship away. It looked like a guy who was destined for the top. And one of the things that was obvious was the explosiveness of Gervonta Davis. The hand speed was evident immediately. He was a much smaller guy than Pedraza, and through periods of his fight, he was out jabbing Pedraza, largely due to the speed and the snap behind his jab. He's clearly a very, very heavy-handed guy. People compare him to Mike Tyson. His nickname's Tank, and you can possibly see why, albeit that he fights at the 130-pound weight division. Because when he hits you, he's just one of them punchers who you can see instantaneously. There's real weight behind his work. And that's probably why he comes into this fight with such a high knockout percentage. All in all, I thought he won the majority of the rounds. I didn't score the fight because I knew when I was watching it how the fight had ended. So I knew there was no point in scoring the fight. But I think the fight ended in round 7. And of those 7 rounds, I scored him at least 5 of the 7 rounds. And I think really he was just able to be the ring general in there. He's got a lot of tools. His reactions are good. He's quite an instinctive fighter. He's got good head movement. He's got good upper body movement. This is a guy who ducks, who bobs, who weaves. He's hard to hit. He's awkward to hit. His jab is effective. When he puts punches together, they're effective. He's got a good range of shorter punches when he shortens up his work. And he's a real good fighter. I would potentially, if I was looking at someone to compare him with, I would say stylistically some similarities to Adrian Broner, but more explosive, faster, and more offensively minded. He's kind of like Broner, the way he's kind of in the ring, weaving and getting low and that sort of thing. And he's kind of like Broner, how he pumps that jab, but there's just a lot more speed, a lot more snap, and a lot more sting behind some of his work. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't want to take anything away from Gervonta Davis. It was a fantastic win. I was very bemused by the performance of Pedraza. For a start, he made a critical error tactically in this fight. And having seen the fight, I don't actually think he'd have won anyway, because I think Davis was clearly the better fighter. But the size difference between these two was obvious. Pedraza, to me, looked like a much bigger man. Certainly in terms of height and range, he was massive, compared to Pedraza. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that he had the same power and bulk in terms of strength and build as Davis, but he had a much bigger frame. He was much longer, and I would have liked to have seen Pedraza establish his jab more and try and fight more of a jabbing, moving fight. Genuinely, I believe that when someone's got that bigger advantage in terms of size and frame, you're somewhat not using your full advantages if you don't at least try and fight from the outside. And for me, it was very peculiar from Pedraza, this performance, in the sense that he didn't even really try to fight this fight for long range, for periods of the fight. He kind of got sucked into a bit of a war. He got sucked into a fight in the pocket, which is really not what you need to do against a guy who's known as a massive puncher, who's a much smaller, stockier type of character than you. Against Stephen Smith, I saw him as a sniper. I saw him someone able to stand on the outside of the pocket and wait and time and catch Stephen Smith coming in and counter and, get his jab working. I saw him as that sort of sniper guy where he had long telescopic punches that came out and, could counter you and could time you and, could really do damage. And we didn't necessarily see that against Gervonta Davis. He abandoned that game plan. And as I say, I think Davies looked the better man in there and looked like he had the range of skills to beat Pedraza, however the fight broke down. But I thought tactically a very odd performance from Pedraza. And I also thought, tactics aside, it was a strange performance from Pedraza. The first 4 rounds, it was hard to give Pedraza any success at all. It looked dominant from Gervonta Davis. Rounds 5 and 6, much better from Pedraza. And I might have got those round numbers wrong, so apologies if I had. But let's say after an initial very sparse start from Gervonta Davis, Pedraza comes into this fight in exceptional fashion. He seems to get a strong second wind. He's hollering and whooping in there and screaming, and he's putting punches together like really, really, really aggressively. He's putting the pressure on Davis. There's points where he backs Davis up. There's points where he's throwing 10-punch combinations, and he massively seems to be coming into the fight. And I was thinking that as a more experienced operator with that bigger size against a guy like Gervonta Davis who hasn't been late in fights, I was surprised Pedraza didn't ram home that advantage. Now, whether it was that Pedraza was hurt and decided to have a big round or two to see if he could have any effect because he knew he was on his way out, or whether it was just that Gervonta Davis's power eventually wore him down and eventually was enough to force the stoppage, I don't know. But what I will say is he seemed to have literally nothing to offer at the start of the fight. He then had a round or two where he looked like he could potentially cause Davis real problems, where he came on very strong and put punches together. And then he folded immediately, and it got to the point where Davies caught him with 1 or 2 shots and Pedraza, literally crumpled and was out of there. So it was very, very strange. Tactically, it was very strange. The strategy he adopted, having nothing to offer at the start of the fight and literally nothing to offer in the 7th round was strange. When you consider how effective he was for periods of the fight, I couldn't really make it out. But despite the fact that is bizarre, and despite the fact I couldn't really make out the performance from Pedraza, nevertheless, Gervonta Davis showed enough in there to show that he is a supreme talent and a very, very exciting person in this sport. You look at the 130-pound weight division, obviously you've got guys like Nicholas Walters in there. You've got Orlando Salida, Jason Sosa, who we know from another Stephen Smith fight. At the top of the division, obviously, you've got Vasyl Lomachenko, and that's the fight I've already heard bandied about a bit more. The Lomachenko fight is clearly an interesting one. They're very, very... they're fighters with huge differences, but also some similarities. Gervonta Davis, I don't know. I just think Pedraza didn't necessarily provide him... He provided him with a very stern test. He didn't provide him with the type of test that I expected Pedraza to. I expected Pedraza to potentially outbox Davis from Reigns, and because he wasn't tested in that fashion, I still wonder if he came up against Lomachenko, whether there's a chance Lomachenko would just outbox him completely from Reigns, and that sort of thing. I wonder if that's a possibility. We don't fundamentally know, because however the fight broke down yesterday, that wasn't a test that was served up to Gervonta Davis. But yeah, he's clearly a huge talent to take on a fight of this magnitude at this stage of his career, and to win with such consummate ease suggests that he's got a lot more to offer, because he's only 22, this is his first fight of this nature, and he's fully entitled to be well before his peak and improve for this performance. So he's a real threat to all. This kind of fight left me wanting to see more. I'd like to see him against a Jason Sosa or someone like that. I appreciate Sosa isn't the kind of fighter who's necessarily going to box him long, but this made me want to see more of him. Very impressed how he took care of Pedraza. I was a bit miffed by Pedraza's performance, but hey, that's boxing sometimes. But Davis is a real eye-catching fighter to watch. Supremely athletic, supremely explosive, speedy, heavy-handed, and very stylish in the ring. Someone who's going to be making waves, and certainly a world champion who we're going to be following on this channel from here on in. Let me know your thoughts, people. Leave them in the comment section below. What did you make of this performance? How do you see Lomachenko versus Gervonta Davis? Who do you think he'll fight next? Comments in the section below, please. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, take the time to subscribe. Many thanks indeed for watching.